The envelope was ivory, fat at the seam, and it sat in the lamplight like a small closed door. My loves. A mother slid it across a lacquered desk and called it Mercy. Imani Brooks was 8 months pregnant when it happened. A black woman, 28, an assistant teacher at a little community daycare, no money of her own, no name in that house. Across from her sat Kang Mi-suk, and behind Mi-suk stood her son, Kang Tae-jun, the black dragon, a dragon inked black down the side of his neck, a watch worth more than the daycare Imani worked in. The folder held forged bank records, her name on every page, transfers she never made, dated to nights she spent in a clinic, holding her husband's hand. Sign the divorce, take the cash, vanish before he comes home. Imani refused. Then she told them she was carrying a boy. Aigu. They put her bags outside the gate. They took her phone, and a woman with a jade ring declared that no child would ever be a Kang. She walked into the rain with no account, no key, no way back. 2 years later, she is standing between her son and the people who came to take him, and she is holding a name she was never supposed to remember. What she does with that name, I still get chills, my loves. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Imani felt the folder before she saw what was inside it. Mi-suk slid it across the lacquered desk with 2 fingers, the way a woman pushes away a plate she has decided not to finish. It stopped an inch from Imani's hands. 8 months of weight sat low in her belly, and she had to lean to reach the thing. Open it, Mi-suk said. The study smelled of cold tea and older money. Imani opened the folder. Bank records, her name at the top of each page. Account numbers she had never seen, transfers she had never made, dates that lined up too neatly with the nights Tae-jun had been away in Busan, cargo manifests photocopied and clipped to the statements. Someone had drawn a small, precise circle around a figure near the bottom, 400,000. The circle had been made with a ruler. Nothing in this house was ever done by a shaking hand. You've been busy, Mi-suk said. Imani turned a page, then another. The paper was crisp, unhandled, printed that morning if she had to guess. These aren't mine. They have your name. Anyone can print a name. Mi-suk folded her hands on the desk. The jade ring caught the lamp. A bank printed these. Banks do not lie for a daughter-in-law. Imani set the folder down flat. She kept her hands on it, both palms, as if holding it still would keep the room from tilting. The baby shifted against her ribs, slow, and she breathed through it the way the midwife had shown her, and she did not let it reach her face. She read the top statement a second time, slower, looking for the seam, the way you look for the join in a wallpaper someone swears is one piece. There was a transfer dated the 9th of March. On the 9th of March, she had been in a clinic on the east side, hearing a heartbeat for the first time, holding Tae-jun's hand so hard she'd left marks. She remembered the marks. She remembered him laughing about them in the car after. Whoever built these pages had not known that day existed, and had put her, on paper, in a room moving money she had never touched. The detail steadied her more than it frightened her. A lie with a date in it can be broken by a date. You forged them, she said. Not loud, just true. Something moved behind Mi-suk's eyes and settled again. She reached beside her chair and lifted a second thing onto the desk. An envelope, ivory, thick at the seam. She did not open it. She let it sit there where the light could touch it. There is cash inside, Mi-suk said. Enough to begin again somewhere warm. You sign the divorce quietly. You leave before he returns. You never contact this family. And these records. She touched the folder without looking at it. disappear. No police, no investors, no stain on the Kang name. You keep your freedom, and you keep whatever pride a woman keeps at a moment like this. The clock on the mantel worked through several seconds. And if I don't sign? Then the records do not disappear. Imani looked at the envelope. Ivory, fat with what a life was apparently worth to this woman. She thought about the 8 years Taejun's mother had spent addressing her, only when a servant was present, correcting her chopsticks at dinner, calling her that girl. To the aunts in a Korean, she assumed Imani could not follow. Imani had followed all of it. She had learned the language the year she married him, learned it the way you learn a house you plan to live in. You've had these ready a while, Imani said. I have had them ready since the wedding. That, at least, was honest. Imani pressed both hands flat and pushed herself to standing. It took a moment. 8 months did not stand quickly. Misuk watched her rise with the patience of a woman who had all the time and all the money and all the doors. Sit down, Misuk said. You'll hurt yourself. I'll stand. Then stand and sign. Misuk produced a pen, black, capped in gold, laid across the folder like a small closed gate. This is mercy, whether or not you can see it tonight. My son is running for the council seat. In 28 days, the vote decides whether he leads or whether he is led. A wife under fraud investigation is a knife in his back. You understand knives, I think. You come from a place that understands them. Imani let that one pass. She had learned which insults to carry and which to set down. He doesn't know you're doing this, she said. He does not need to know. A mother removes the stone before the son trips on it. He'll ask where I went. He will be told what is useful. He loves me. Misuk's mouth moved, not quite a smile. My son loves many things he cannot keep. A car he wrecked at 20, a dog that bit the gardener. He loves, and then he is made to understand, and then he is grateful. He will be grateful for this too. Give it a year. She said it without cruelty, which was worse than cruelty. She said it without cruelty. She said it without cruelty. You think I am taking something from you. I am taking something from him, and I have decided I am allowed. Imani heard, under the flat voice, the one true note in everything the woman had said tonight, that she believed it. That somewhere in the long arithmetic of the Kang name, a mother had convinced herself that breaking her son was a form of raising him. You've done this before, Imani said. To someone. For the first time, Misuk looked away, toward the ancestors, or toward the dark window, or toward nothing. It lasted no longer than a breath. Then she came back, and the small opening had shut, and her voice was the desk again, flat and finished. Sign the paper, she said. The baby turned again. Imani's hand went to the side of her belly without her deciding it, cupping, steadying. Misuk's gaze dropped to the movement and stayed there a half-second too long. A crack, small, in the lacquer. You keep saying, my son. Imani said, you never once ask about his child. The child is not the family's concern. It's a boy. The words landed in the room and changed the temperature of it. Misuk's hands, folded so neatly, went still in a new way. The stillness of a woman doing arithmetic she had not expected to do tonight. In this house, a boy was not a baby. A boy was a name that carried, a share that voted, a line that continued. A boy was 12% of everything when he came of age. Imani watched the old woman understand this, and hated that she had used it, and used it anyway. You're certain, Misuk said. I've seen the scans. He has his father's brow already. For one moment, Misuk looked at Imani's belly, the way you look at a thing you want, and have decided you cannot afford to want. Then the moment closed, the council seat, the vote, the knife. She rebuilt her face brick by brick, and it came back colder than before, because that is what fear does to a certain kind of pride. It does not soften it, it hardens it into something that must win. That changes nothing, Misuk said. It changes the price, perhaps, not the answer. She uncapped the pen herself and held it out. Sign. For the boy, then. A child does not need a mother in a courtroom. A child needs a mother who is free to raise him. I am offering you both. You're offering me a bribe to walk away from his father. I am offering you a clean exit from a dirty story you cannot win. Imani looked at the pen. Black, gold at the cap, held out across the desk in a steady hand. She thought about how easy the wrong thing always looks in the moment it is offered. A signature, a warm place, an envelope thick enough to make the next month soft. She thought about a boy growing up somewhere warm, with a mother who had traded his name for quiet, and how that boy would one day ask about his father, and how every answer she could give would begin with a lie she had signed at 8 months pregnant, in a cold study, while a woman watched her hand. Her palm was flat on the folder still. She could feel the ridge of the ruled circle through the paper. Imani did not take the pen. She would remember, later, that she had not planned the next word. It simply arrived, the way the truest things do, before the careful part of her could dress it up. No. Misuk did not blink. Think. I have thought for 8 years. No. Imani's voice stayed level, low, almost gentle, and that gentleness seemed to unsettle the old woman more than shouting would have. My son will know his name, both halves of it. I'm not signing your paper, and I'm not taking your envelope, and if you send those records to anyone, I will spend the rest of my life proving in daylight what you did in the dark. Aigu. Misuk, you should have picked a quieter daughter-in-law. The Korean, whispered, was the thing that broke it. Misuk stood. Slowly, because she never did anything quickly either, and in this, at least, they were the same. She pressed a small button set into the underside of the desk. Somewhere in the house, a soft chime answered. Give me your phone, she said. No. You have no account in this family, no card that will clear, no name on any door here past tonight. The phone is the family's. It was a gift, and gifts return. Give it to me, or my people will take it, and I would rather you kept the dignity. The study door opened. 2 men in dark suits filled it, hands folded low, faces arranged into the particular blankness of men paid to have no opinion. Imani looked at them and understood the shape of the next hour before it happened. She took the phone from her cardigan pocket, held it a moment. Everything was in it, the scan images, Taejun's number, the midwife, the 3 friends she had left after 8 years in a marriage that had slowly walled her in. She thought about deleting it all first. She looked at Misuk and decided she would not give the woman the satisfaction of watching her scramble. She set it on the desk, screen down, beside the ivory envelope she had refused. You'll regret this, Imani said. Not a threat. An observation. The way you tell someone the tide is coming in. I have never once regretted protecting this family. That's the saddest thing you've said all night. One of the men stepped forward at a small motion of Misuk's chin. He did not touch Imani. He simply opened his hand toward the door, an usher's gesture, and waited. Your things are being brought down, Misuk said. You will find them at the gate. I have had them packed properly. I am not a monster. You had them packed before I came in. Misuk did not deny it. Misuk turned the phone face down herself, a small, tidy motion, and slid it to the edge of the desk out of Imani's reach. Then she picked up the ivory envelope, the refused one, and returned it to a drawer, and locked the drawer, and pocketed the little key. Every gesture was housekeeping. A woman putting a room back the way she liked it. Aisha will bring your coat down, Misuk said. It is raining. You're sending me into it anyway. I am telling you it is raining. What you walk into is your own choosing. You could still sign. Imani looked at the pen lying across the folder, capped again now, a small closed gate. She thought of the 9th of March and the marks on her husband's hand. She said nothing, which was its own answer, and Misuk read it correctly and gave the smallest nod, as if a transaction had closed at a fair price. They walked her out through the long hall where the ancestors hung in their black frames, Kang men going back 4 generations, oil paint and hard mouths, and Imani felt each of them watch a stranger carry her toward the door. Her feet were swollen in the flats she'd chosen for comfort. One hand stayed under her belly. The other trailed the wall, not for balance, exactly, for something to touch that was real while the ground of her life dissolved. At the top of the front steps, the night came up to meet her, wet and cold and full of the smell of coming rain. The mansion sat behind its wall like a jaw, down the long drive, past the fountain that had stopped for the season. The iron gate stood shut, and against its bars, she could just make them out under the last lamp. 2 suitcases and a garment bag waited in a neat row on the gravel, packed properly. The woman had said it like a kindness. The men did not follow her down the drive. They stood at the top of the steps with their hands folded and watched her go, which was its own message. You are not worth escorting, only worth removing. Halfway down, the first drops came. Fat, slow, then faster, the way summer rain arrives in this city, all at once, deciding. By the time Imani reached the gate, her hair was heavy with it, and the cream trousers had gone dark at the thighs, and the terracotta blouse clung cold to her back. She stood over the suitcases. Someone inside the wall had thought to zip a rain cover over the garment bag. Not over her. The gate was locked. She found the small pedestrian panel to the side, the one the staff used, and it gave when she pushed, and she understood then that the whole choreography had been decided long before she'd been called into the study. The forged records, the envelope, the men at the door, the bags at the gate that opened only outward. Misuk had not lost her temper tonight. Misuk had run a schedule. For a moment, she stood at the panel with her hand on it and did not push. Behind her, the drive climbed back toward the warm windows. She could turn around. She could walk up the gravel and pound on that heavy door and stand there dripping until her husband came home and let him find her and let the truth fight the paper in the morning. She weighed it the way you weigh a thing you already know you won't do. Tae-jun would come home to a story his mother had arranged first. Forged records, a missing wife, a house full of staff who answered to the woman with the key in her pocket. Whatever he loved, he was, by his mother's own account, made to understand. Imani would not stand at that door and gamble her son on which understanding won. She pushed the panel and stepped through. Imani dragged the cases through, one at a time, onto the public side. The gate settled shut behind her with a sound like a held breath let go. Through the bars the mansion glowed, warm windows, a house full of rooms she would never stand in again, and somewhere behind one of those windows, a small phone lay screen down on a desk with her whole life inside it. She looked up once at the 2nd floor. A curtain moved, or the rain moved it. She would never know which, and she made herself stop looking before she could decide it mattered. She had $41 in the cardigan pocket, folded soft from being carried. She had 2 suitcases she could not carry both of at once. Not at 8 months, not on this hill. She had no phone, no card that would clear, no name on any door. She had a boy turning slow beneath her ribs, patient, as if he already knew how to wait out the people who did not want him. She thought, absurdly, about the heavier case still standing at the gate, the one with the winter things, the good coat, the folder of scan images she had kept because paper could not be confiscated the way a phone could. She had left it because she had to choose. She told herself she would send someone for it. She knew, even as she told herself, that no one was coming. that the case would be gone by morning, taken inside or taken by the rain, and that the scans in it were the last proof of the 9th of March she had. Some things you learn to lose, in the same breath you lose them. The rain found its rhythm. Imani pulled the beige cardigan tighter, though it had stopped being any use against the cold, and she picked up the lighter of the two cases, and she left the heavier one at the gate because she had to choose, and choosing was all she had left. She would come back for it, or she would not. Tonight she would walk. She did not cry. She had noticed that about herself over the years, that the tears came for small kindnesses and never for the large cruelties, as if the body knew to save its strength for a fight. She set one swollen foot in front of the other on the wet gravel, then onto the sidewalk, then down the long, dark slope of the hill toward the city's lower lights, where somewhere there would be a bus that took cash, or a bench under an awning, or a door that opened inward for once. Behind her, the gate stayed shut. Above it, on the wall, a small camera turned a few degrees to keep her in frame, then lost interest, then turned back to the empty drive. Under the last streetlight, before the hill fell away, Imani stopped. She set the case down. She reached into the collar of the ruined blouse and drew out the thin chain she wore under everything, the one Misuk's men had not thought to ask for because they had not known to look. The wedding ring hung on it, warm from her skin. She closed her hand around it, held it until the metal edge bit her palm. "Mark this," she thought, in her own voice, not anyone else's. "Mark this night." Then she tucked the ring back under her collar where it lived, and she picked up the case, and she walked down into the rain, and the boy turned once more beneath her heart, and the mansion behind her put out its lights, one window at a time, as if the house itself were closing its eyes on what it had done. Imani wiped the applesauce off the low table for the 3rd time that morning, before she let the children back to it. 2 years had a way of teaching a woman which battles were worth her knees on a tile floor. She had learned the daycare the way she once learned a language, one hard word at a time, until the words stopped being work and started being hers. The room smelled of crayon and warm milk, 11 children under 4, and one of them was hers. Micah sat by the window with a wooden truck he refused to share, and he turned it over and over in his hands, like there was a secret printed on the underside. When he wanted to think, he tilted his head to the left and pressed his thumb hard into his own palm. He had done it since before he could walk. Imani had stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing your own heartbeat. Ruth Alvarez came in from the front with a stack of nap mats and a look on her face that did not match the mats. "There's a car outside," Ruth said. "Been there 20 minutes. Black. 2 of them now." Imani straightened. The rag was still in her hand. "Parent? No parent I know drives that." She went to the window without hurrying, because hurrying in front of children taught them to be afraid, and she did not raise afraid children. Through the glass, she saw the car at the curb, and behind it a second one, and standing on the sidewalk, in ivory tailoring, with a jade green scarf knotted at the throat, was a woman Imani had spent 2 years not thinking about. Something in her chest folded closed like a fan. "Ruth," she said, very evenly, "take the children to the back room. All of them. Now. But calm. Sing something." Ruth looked at her, looked at the woman on the sidewalk, and did not ask. That was the thing about Ruth. She clapped her hands twice, bright as a bell, and told the children it was song time in the blue room, and the little bodies got up and toddled after her, and Micah went too because Micah went where the other children went, still holding the truck. Imani did not go to the back. She went to the front door and she opened it before Misuk could knock, because a woman who opens her own door first is a woman who decides where the line is. Misuk had not aged so much as sharpened. The silver in her hair was arranged now like something a museum had approved. Behind her stood a man in a charcoal gray suit Imani did not know, thin-faced, a small scar beside his left eyebrow, holding a leather folder against his chest. Beside him, a younger woman in a lanyard that said, in laminated capitals, Child Welfare Liaison, though no county in this city issued a lanyard like that. And behind all three, at the edges, two men whose jackets sat wrong over their shoulders because of what the jackets were hiding. Maimani, Misuk said. She said the name the way you name a stain. You look tired. You're on a public sidewalk, Imani said. Say what you came to say from there. Misuk's mouth moved into something that was not a smile. I came for my grandson. The word landed, and Imani let it land. She had rehearsed this without knowing she was rehearsing it. Every night for 2 years, in the dark, some part of her had been standing in exactly this doorway. He has a name, Imani said. You never once asked it. The man with the folder stepped forward half a pace. Ms. Brooks. My name is Han Song-ho. I represent the Kang family's interests. His English was smooth, unhurried, a blade wiped clean. There are documented concerns about the welfare of the minor child. Ms. Kim here is a child protection consultant. We're asking for a supervised transfer of the child into family care. It can be done quietly. That's the kindness we're offering. You're offering, Imani repeated. The alternative is louder. She looked at the lanyard woman, Kim, who could not hold her eyes. She looked at Han, who could. And she understood, in the cold, clean way you understand a thing you have no proof of yet, that the woman with the lanyard was a costume, and the man with the folder was the only one in this group who mattered, and that Misuk, for the first time in the 8 years Imani had known her, was standing slightly behind someone else. Show me the order, Imani said. Han's expression did not change. The paperwork is being finalized. This is a voluntary. Then it's a no. She kept her voice low, smooth, the voice she used on children mid-tantrum, the voice that gives an adult nothing to push against. You don't have a judge's signature. You have a folder and a lanyard from a costume shop. You want my son, you bring me a real order, signed, stamped, with a case number I can call the courthouse and confirm. Until then, you are 3 strangers and 2 bodyguards standing outside a licensed daycare, and I am about to make that everyone's problem. Behind her, through the wall, she could hear Ruth's voice lifting the children through a song about a little spider. She held on to that sound. Misuk's chin came up. You think a piece of paper protects you. Aigu. The Korean slipped out of her like steam from a cracked lid. I have papers too, child. I have had papers since before you knew what you married into. I know exactly what I married into, Imani said. I met it in a study, at night, with a pen. For 1 second, something crossed the older woman's face that was almost respect and almost hate, and the two were hard to tell apart on her. Han made a small motion with 2 fingers. The men at the edges shifted their weight forward, and one of them looked past Imani into the building, reading the room the way men like that read rooms, counting exits, counting bodies. Imani stepped fully into the doorway so her body filled it. Ruth, she called, without turning her head, her voice pitched to carry through the wall. Protocol! There was a half-second of nothing. Then, from the back, a small, hard sound, the daycare's emergency line being lifted off its cradle, and Ruth's voice, no longer singing, saying an address into a phone, clear and slow, twice. Kim, the lanyard woman, flinched. You said this would be, she started, to Han, and stopped. Quiet, Han finished for her. He was still looking at Imani. It could still be quiet. It stopped being quiet the day she packed my bags before I'd said no. Imani did not raise her voice. She never once raised her voice. That was the whole of it, that she never had to. You are not taking him. Not on a sidewalk. Not with a lanyard. Not today. One of the men moved. Not far. A single step, testing, and put the flat of his hand against the doorframe above Imani's shoulder. Close. A wall of a man leaning his weight into the space she was defending. He smelled of cigarettes and cold car. He said nothing. He did not have to. His whole body was the sentence. Imani did not step back. She looked up at him and she held very, very still. And inside her something that was 2 years old and older than that went perfectly quiet, the way a mother's fear goes quiet the moment it becomes something else. "Take your hand off my door," she said. He didn't. And that was the moment a third car came around the corner, too fast, and stopped at an angle in the middle of the street, and the door was open before the wheels had finished settling. The man who got out was tall and broad through the shoulders in a way the black suit only tried to contain, and Imani knew the shape of him before her mind caught up to it, knew it in her spine, in the 2-year-old ache behind her ribs. Dark hair, a little wave to it. On the right side of his neck, rising from under the collar toward the ear, the dragon, Taejun. He crossed the sidewalk without looking at his mother. He looked at the man with his hand on the doorframe, and he said one word in Korean, "Lo," and the word did to the man what a leash does to a dog that has forgotten it is wearing one. The hand came off the frame. The step retreated. Then Taejun looked at Imani, and for one breath, neither of them was 30 years old and armored. For one breath, they were the two people who had held hands in a clinic and heard a heartbeat. "Where is he?" Taejun said. Not a demand, almost the opposite of a demand. "You don't get to," Imani began. And then she felt it, the small weight against the back of her leg, because children do not stay in blue rooms when the singing stops. Micah had come to find her. He always came to find her. He stood half behind her knee with the wooden truck clutched to his chest, and he looked up at all these tall strangers with his mother's stillness and his father's face, and when the strangers looked back at him, he did the thing he did when the world was too much and he needed to think. He tilted his head to the left. He pressed his thumb into his palm. Imani felt the world go thin. Taejun stopped breathing. She watched it happen. She watched a man who ran a thing that made grown men lower their eyes go absolutely motionless at the sight of a 2-year-old tilting his head, because it was his head tilt, the one his own mother had a photograph of him doing at that exact age, the one that ran in the Kang blood 4 generations deep and hung framed in a hallway Imani had been marched down in the rain. She watched Taejun look at the boy's eyes, deep set, dark brown, his eyes, and the eyebrows, the straight, thick Kang eyebrows sitting on a small brown face, and she watched him do the arithmetic that his mother had spent 2 years and a great deal of money making sure he would never have the chance to do. "How old?" Taejun said. His voice had gone to gravel. Imani put her hand back and rested it on Micah's soft curls, and she did not answer, because the answer was standing there in a Straliv green polo, pressing his thumb into his palm, and any fool could count. Mi-suk moved then, fast for a woman of 58, reaching. "Give the child to Mr. Han, we are leaving. This is not the Uma." Taejun said it quietly, and it cut her in half. He had not raised his voice either. Perhaps that was where the boy got it. "Do not touch him." "He is a Kang," Mi-suk hissed, and in her haste she said the truest thing she had said all morning. "That is exactly why we—" "He is a Kang," Taejun said, and something terrible and new was climbing into his face. "And you knew." The sentence sat in the street. Han closed his folder. It was a small sound, but Imani heard it, and she filed it away with the other small sounds she was learning to notice. The closing of a folder, by a man who has realized the plan just changed shape under him and is already, behind his clean, flat eyes, building the next one. The sirens came up the avenue then, 2 of them, and the men with the wrong-fitting jackets did the mathematics of the day and decided against it. They drifted back toward the black cars, the way smoke drifts from a room, present one moment, gone the next, professional to the last. A patrol car nosed in behind Taejun's. 2 officers got out, unhurried, hands loose, reading the scene. "Somebody call about a custody dispute?" the first one said. "I did," Ruth said from the doorway, planted there now like a second door, her printed dress and her mustard cardigan and her daycare keyring, all 5 feet of her between the world and the blue room. These people tried to take a child. No court order. She asked for one. They didn't have one. The officer looked at Han. "You got paper?" "We were discussing a voluntary arrangement," Han said, smooth as ever. "That's a no," the officer said, and Imani almost laughed, because it was her own line, come back to her in a stranger's mouth. "Nobody's taking any kid off a sidewalk today. You want custody, you do it in a building with a judge in it. Everybody else, clear off." Mi-suk's eyes moved once around the whole scene, the officers, her son, the boy, Imani's hand in the boy's hair, and Imani watched her do a colder arithmetic than any of them, watched her subtract the child she could not take today from the thing she still needed, and arrive at a number she could live with. She drew her rigid handbag up against her body. She did not look at her grandson, she looked at Imani. "This isn't the paper," Mi-suk said softly, in Korean, so the officers would not follow it. "The paper is coming. Then I'll read it," Imani answered, in Korean, just as soft, the same way I read the last one you made. Something flickered. Then Mi-suk turned, and Han turned with her, and Kim in her costume lanyard hurried after them, and the black cars took them, and the street was suddenly only a street again, with sirens winding down, and a wooden truck fallen somewhere on the sidewalk, and a child who had begun, at last, now that the tall strangers were leaving, to cry. Imani knelt and gathered him up. He pressed his wet face into her neck, and she felt the whole small weight of him, and she breathed him in, and only then, with her back to everyone, did she let her own hands shake, once, briefly, where no one could grate it. When she stood, Taejun was still there. He had not gone with his mother. He stood on the sidewalk in front of a daycare with his hands empty at his sides. A man who had walked out of a car to stop one crime and walked straight into the ruins of another, and he was looking at his son's face over Imani's shoulder, like a man looking at something he had been robbed of without ever being told it existed. Imani, her name again. It kept coming out of him like it hurt. "Is he?" "His name is Micah," she said. "Micah Brooks Kang." She let the second half of it land on him deliberately, because he needed to know she had never once hidden the boy, that the boy had carried both their names on paper the whole time, in the open, waiting. "He's 2. He was born the winter after your mother put me out the gate in the rain and took my phone so I couldn't call you." Taejun's jaw worked. "I didn't know. I know you didn't," Imani said. And that was the worst part, and both of them knew it was the worst part. That was the whole design, my. She caught the word before it left her. The old endearment, the reflex of 8 years, and she put it away. That was the whole design. She made sure you didn't know, and you were somewhere trusting her to remove the stones before you tripped on them. He flinched at that, at the phrasing, and she understood he recognized it, that it was his mother's own justification come back at him in his wife's mouth, and she was glad it cut. She was not a cruel woman, but she had walked down a wet Alameda with $41, and some accounts a person keeps. "You put me out," Taejun said. It was not a question to her. He was asking it of the empty air where his mother had stood, testing the shape of a thing he had not known was true a minute ago. In the rain, 8 months. Ask her, Imani said. She'll tell you it was a kindness. She told me the same. She packs the bag before she says the word, and then she calls it mercy that the bag was already packed. His hand rose halfway toward the boy and stopped in the air, uncertain. A big hand that had signed off on things Imani did not let herself imagine, hanging useless in the space between him and his son. Can I? He stopped, started over, lower. Will he let me hold him? No, Imani said, not cruelly, only true. He doesn't know you. That's not his fault, and it isn't going to be fixed on a sidewalk. Put your hand down. He put his hand down. Ruth stepped up beside her. Inside, Miha. The little one's cold, she said it to Imani, but her eyes stayed on Taejun, taking his measure, dragon and all. Imani carried Micah to the door. On the threshold she stopped, because she was not a woman who left a thing half said when the saying of it mattered. She turned. Taejun stood where she'd left him, and behind his shock, something else was assembling. Something she recognized because she had felt it assemble in herself 2 years ago in a study, the slow architecture of a person deciding to fight. You want to be his father, Imani said. You'll do it on my terms, in daylight, with paper I can read. No security, no surprises on sidewalks, no mother. She let that one sit. You bring her within a block of him again, and I will spend every dollar I don't have making it the most expensive mistake of the Kang name. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, once, the way a man nods when he has just been handed the only honest thing anyone has said to him all year. Terms, he said. Yours. Imani went inside and let the door close, and she sat down on the small chair by the window with her son in her lap, and she did not cry, and she did not shake, not anymore. And she rocked him until the truck was forgiven and the strangers were forgotten, and out on the street she heard one car door, and then an engine, and then a man driving away from a daycare with a 2-year-old's head tilt printed on the inside of his eyes where it would never come off again. Later, after the children were gone and Ruth had swept and the room smelled only of the end of the day, Imani stood at the window with the phone in her hand and the name Han Sung-ho on her tongue, like a coin she was tasting for counterfeit. Represents the Kang family's interests. He had said it smooth, but she had spent 8 years at Kang tables, and she knew every man who represented the family's interests, and she had never once, in 8 years, heard that name. A man the family used, whom the family did not know. A woman standing behind him who had always stood in front. Imani did not know yet what it meant, but she knew the shape of not knowing, and she knew that the shape was moving, and for the first time since the rain, she felt something that was not grief and was not fear. She felt the trail open under her feet. The clinic swab came back on a Tuesday, and Imani read the results standing in the daycare kitchen with a mop still in her hand. 99.9. A decimal that closes a door and opens another. She folded the paper along the crease it already had, from being carried in her cardigan pocket for 2 days, and she slid it back inside. Micah was in the blue room, stacking blocks into a tower that would not hold. She could hear him narrating to himself in the private language of a 2-year-old. She let the mop rest against the sink. The result was not a surprise. She had watched the man see his own eyes in her son's face on a sidewalk. What the paper gave her was not truth. It was leverage, and leverage was a thing she had learned to hold carefully, the way you hold a knife you have not decided to use. Taejun's lawyer wanted to meet in an office 40 floors above the street. Imani said no. She named a place 3 blocks from the daycare, a coffee shop with a cracked vinyl booth and a bell over the door, and she said she would be there at 9, after drop-off, for exactly 1 hour. The lawyer's assistant called back twice to suggest somewhere more appropriate. Imani stopped answering the second time. She arrived first. She chose the booth that faced the door. Taejun came without security. That she noticed. He came without his mother, and that she noticed more. He wore the black suit and the overcoat, and when he folded himself into the booth across from her, his knees hit the underside of the table, and he did not complain. He set a leather folder down between them, and he did not open it. "You said terms," he said. "Yours." "I did." The waitress came. He ordered black coffee in accented English and did not look at the menu. Imani ordered nothing. She had a glass of water she had poured herself from the pitcher at the counter, and she kept both hands around it. "Say them," he said. She said them slowly, one at a time, the way you set stones across a river so a child can cross. Supervised visits, every one of them, until she decided otherwise, and she would be the one who decided, in a place she chose. She would be in the room or in the next room with the door open. No photographs, not by him, not by anyone who worked for him, not for a magazine, not for a family shrine, not for a lawyer's file. Micah's face would not appear on a single screen that Taejun controlled. No security, no men in the cars, no men on the corner. If she saw one, the visit ended, and the next one did not happen. And no decision about the boy, not his school, not his name, not his passport, not a haircut, without her yes first. Not his mother's yes, not a court's yes arranged behind her back, hers. Taejun listened with his hands flat on the table. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, and the bell over the door rang as someone left, and neither of them turned. "That's everything," he said. "That's the beginning of everything." He turned the coffee cup a quarter turn, the way a man turns something when his hands need a task. "My lawyers will say these terms give me nothing. No standing. No security of access. That you can end it any morning you wake up angry. They're right. Then why would I sign? Because you put me in the rain." She said it without heat, which was worse than heat, and he felt it land. "You didn't do it with your hands, but it was your house, your name, your mother, and your 2 years of not asking a single question about the woman who was carrying your child. You get to be a father, Taejun. You don't get to be one on your terms. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You earn the terms back. One visit at a time." The waitress set his coffee down. He did not touch it. "And if I don't sign, then you're a man with a DNA test and no relationship, and I raise my son the way I've already been raising him for 2 years, alone. With $41 less than I'd like." She let a corner of her mouth move, not quite a smile. "I've done it that long. I can do it longer." He opened the folder then. Inside were his lawyer's papers, dense and armored, the kind of document built to win a war. He looked at them the way you look at a coat that no longer fits. Then he took a pen from inside his jacket. Not a fountain pen, she noticed, just a plain black pen, and she wondered later why that detail stayed with her, and he drew a single line through the first paragraph. "Write yours," he said. "I'll sign yours." They wrote it on 3 napkins and the back of the lawyer's cover page, in her handwriting, because she did not trust his to say what she meant. Supervised, no photos, no security, no decision without her. He signed under each line. She signed beside him. The waitress refilled the water pitcher and pretended not to watch 2 strangers make a contract out of paper napkins. When it was done, he capped the pen and looked at her, and for one breath he was not a boss, or a Kang, or a man with a dragon under his collar. He was someone who had lost 8 years, and did not know where they had gone. "The boy," he said. "Micah." He tilts his head. "When he's thinking. I know. My father did that." She had not known that. She held it, and she did not give him anything back for it, because she had learned that a woman who gives too much in the first hour has nothing left for the second. first visit is Saturday, she said. The daycare, 10 to 11. Ruth will be there. I'll be there. You'll sit on the floor, because that's where he lives, and you'll let him come to you, or not come to you, and you won't reach for him. She stood, gathering the napkins, folding them into her bag beside the folded clinic result. You reach for him before he reaches for you, and we're done. Understood. She was almost to the door when he said her name. Not Mrs. Kang, not any of the names the family had used for her at their long tables. Just Imani. Thank you for keeping the name on him, he said. Brooks Kang. You could have taken mine off. On the paper, you didn't. She stood with her hand on the door and the bell trembling under her fingers. I didn't keep your name for you, she said. I kept it for him. So that one day, when he asks, I can tell him the truth about where half of him comes from. All of it. The good half and the half that put me in the rain. She pushed the door open. Saturday, 10 o'clock. Sit on the floor. Saturday, he sat on the floor. He was too large for it. His knees came up and his overcoat pooled around him, and he looked, in the small bright room with the alphabet on the wall, like something built for a different scale of world. Micah studied him from behind Ruth's leg for 11 minutes. Imani counted. Then the boy walked over, set the wooden truck in the man's lap without a word, and walked away again to get a second truck, and that was the whole visit. A boy loaning a stranger a toy and taking it back, and when the hour ended, Taejun stood up with a stiffness that had nothing to do with his knees. Same time next week, Imani said. Same time next week, he said, like a man repeating a prayer he did not yet believe in. He came the next Saturday, and the one after. He learned to sit without reaching. He learned the boy's private language a word at a time. Imani watched from the doorway with her arms folded, and she gave nothing away, and inside her, something she had padlocked 2 years ago in the rain shifted against the lock and she pressed it back down. She did not trust the quiet. Quiet, in the world she had married into, was the sound money made while it moved. The trail she had felt open under her feet did not announce itself. It came the way the important things always came to her, in a document, in a name, in a number that sat wrong. Taejun's people, as part of the brittle new arrangement, had to disclose the family's holdings for the custody file. Not to her, to the court. But the terms she had written on 3 napkins gave her the right to see anything that touched Micah's future. And Micah, whether she liked it or not, was 12% of a great deal of money on a day 18 years away. So the disclosure came to her, 400 pages in a bound folder, delivered by a courier who made her sign for it. She read it at the kitchen table after Micah was asleep, with a mug of tea going cold, and a pencil behind her ear. She read the way she had learned to read in 8 years of Kang dinners, not for what was said, but for the shape of what was left out. On page 211, in a list of subsidiary vendors, a name reached up off the page and put a cold hand on the back of her neck. North Meridian Logistics. She knew it, not from the custody file, from a spreadsheet. From 4 years ago, before the rain, before Micah, in the early months when Mi-suk had still let her sit near the edges of the family's business, because a decorative young wife was useful for pouring tea and remembering nothing. She had seen that name once, in a column on Mi-suk's laptop, in a spreadsheet the old woman had closed a half-second too late when Imani leaned in with the teapot. She had thought nothing of it then. A shipping vendor. The family moved cargo. The family used vendors. She had poured the tea and forgotten the name. She had not forgotten the name. She understood that now. It had been sitting in her for 4 years, a splinter under the skin, waiting. She set the pencil down. North Meridian Logistics. A vendor that appeared on Mi-suk's private spreadsheet years before the fraud that got manufactured with Imani's name on it. A vendor that appeared again now, quietly, in a list 400 pages deep, in a custody file about her son. She did not believe in coincidence. She had watched a woman pack her bags before deciding to throw her out. She knew what it looked like when a thing was arranged in advance and dressed up later as an accident. She got up, she checked the lock on the door, and the lock on the window, and she stood over Micah's crib for a while listening to him breathe. Then she came back to the table, and she did something she had not done in 2 years. She made a list. Not a grocery list, a hunter's list. What is North Meridian? Who owns it? Who signs for it? Why is a shipping vendor sitting on a private spreadsheet in the personal laptop of a woman who forges bank records for a hobby? And why? This was the question that kept her at the table until the tea was a cold brown ring. Why did the forged documents that Misuk slid across a desk the night she threw Imani into the rain, the documents about cargo manifests and $400,000, why did they smell, now that she thought about it with 4 years of distance, why did they smell like they had been built out of real numbers? You do not forge a lie out of nothing. You forge a lie out of a truth, bent. The best forgery is a real transaction with one name changed. Whose real transaction had Misuk bent to build a fake one and hang it on Imani? She wrote North Meridian at the top of a fresh page and underlined it twice, and then she underlined it a third time, and the pencil tip broke. She started the next morning, in the 20 minutes between drop-off and the first tables needing wiping. The daycare had a computer, an old one, that Ruth used for enrollment forms. Imani searched the name. North Meridian Logistics returned almost nothing. A registered address in a state she had never visited. A single filing, 3 years old. No website worth the name, no employees she could find, no trucks, no warehouse, no photographs of a loading dock. A shipping company that shipped nothing, that existed the way a coat hung on a chair exists to make a room look occupied. An empty company with her family's money running through it. She printed the one filing, she folded it and put it in her bag, in the inside pocket, the one with the zipper, next to the clinic result and beside the folded napkins she had never taken out. 3 papers now, riding together against her hip. A test that proved who the boy was. A contract that said who got to decide his life. And a filing for a company that did not exist, that her mother-in-law had known the name of 4 years before it was used to frame her. Ruth came in with the first children and found Imani standing very still by the old computer. "You look like my mother did," Ruth said, the day she figured out my father was lying about the money. "What did your mother do?" She followed it. Ruth set a toddler down, and the toddler ran. All the way down. It wasn't pretty at the bottom. But she was the one still standing when the water cleared. Imani zipped the pocket shut. That afternoon, Taejun came for the Saturday visit a day early, because the boy had a cough and he wanted to see him, and this small, unrequested tenderness was the kind of thing that could have softened her if she had let it. She let him in. She let him sit on the floor. She watched him press the back of his hand to Micah's forehead, the way a father does, clumsy and certain at once, and she said nothing about North Meridian, and she said nothing about the empty company, and she said nothing about the spreadsheet from 4 years ago. Because she did not yet know how deep it went, and because she had learned, in a study, at night, with a pen held out across a desk, that you do not show your hand to anyone whose mother is still holding a knife you have not located. She let him love the boy for an hour, then she walked him to the door. "He likes you," she said. "He doesn't know why yet, neither do I." He almost smiled. "Is that a term?" "No, that's the truth." "They're different." She held the door. "Go home, Taejun." He went. She watched his car until it turned the corner, and then she stood at the window a while longer, the way she had stood 2 years ago, on this same day of the week, in this same failing light. Somewhere out there was an empty company with her name half buried in its foundations. Somewhere out there was a man named Han Sung-ho, whose name she had never heard in 8 years of Kong tables. Standing behind that empty company, or in front of it, she did not yet know which. Somewhere out there, Mi-suk was financing something, arranging something, packing the bags before deciding to throw someone out, because that was the only way the old woman knew how to move through the world. Imani put her hand against the glass. It was cold. She was not the girl in the rain anymore. That girl had walked down a hill with $41 and a leaky suitcase and no name on any door. This woman had a son asleep in a crib, a contract written on napkins, a broken pencil, and a name, North Meridian, underlined 3 times on a page in a zippered pocket against her hip. She did not know yet who Han Sung-ho was. She did not know that the money moving through the empty company had a destination, and that the destination had a name, and that the name was her own. She only knew the shape of a thing hidden, and she had promised herself, standing over her son's crib, that this time she would reach the bottom before someone else reached her boy. She turned off the daycare lights, one switch at a time. Then she went to find out what North Meridian was. The filing gave her a name she didn't recognize, and an address in a state she'd never touched. Imani read it under the daycare's dead fluorescent tube until the letters stopped meaning anything. Then she started meaning them again. A registered agent. That was all North Meridian had for a face. A service that rented its name to 900 other companies, a mailbox in a strip of mailboxes. Somebody had built a company to be a hallway. You walked in one door and out the other, and the money went with you. She needed someone who read hallways for a living. Ruth knew a man. Ruth always knew a man. This one had done books for a union pension fund for 30 years before his knees quit, and he owed Ruth for something neither of them would name in front of Imani. His name was Delacroix, and he met her in the back of a laundromat on a Tuesday, because the laundromat was his cousin's, and nobody billed him for the table. "You brought coffee," he said. "People who bring coffee want something for free. I brought the filing too." He put on glasses older than Micah and read for 11 minutes without speaking. Imani counted. She'd started counting minutes the day Taejun sat on the daycare floor, and she hadn't stopped. 11 minutes for a man to look at one page. Then he set it down and looked at her over the rims. "Who told you to be scared of this?" "Nobody." "Good. Because this alone is nothing. A shell is legal. Half of Delaware is a shell." He tapped the address. "But a shell only matters by what runs through it. You bring me the pipe, I'll tell you the water." The pipe was 400 pages in a binder she wasn't supposed to have understood. She brought it the next morning, before the children came, and she sat across from him, while he turned pages with a licked thumb and made small marks in the margins with a golf pencil. Every so often he grunted. The grunts were not the same. She learned to read the grunts before she could read the pages. "Here," he said, near the end. "Your family moves money like everybody moves money. Vendor pays, vendor pays, vendor. Boring. Clean. Until..." He turned the binder to face her and laid the golf pencil across a line. "This one, North Meridian invoices for freight brokerage. Freight. You said this company has no trucks." "No trucks, no warehouse, no website." "Then what did they broker?" He didn't say it like a question. 3 payments, each one under the number that trips a report. Somebody knew the number. He circled the air above the page with the pencil. "This isn't a thief being greedy, This is a thief being patient. Patient scares me more." Imani wrote the 3 amounts on the back of her hand because she had no phone and trusted paper less than skin. "Under the number that trips a report," she said. "How much under?" "A hair." He held 2 fingers a whisper apart. "The difference between careful and lucky. Nobody's lucky 3 times in a row." He closed the binder and pushed it back to her side of the table. Gentle, the way you return a thing that might bite. Whoever built this counted the way a surgeon counts. Fast, but never once wrong. She thought of a woman circling 400,000 with a ruler so the line wouldn't waver. Never once wrong. She kept that thought where she kept the others, folded small. He wouldn't take money. He took the coffee and a promise that if this went where he thought it went, she'd walk out of it standing. I did books for men who thought they were gods, he said at the door. The books don't care. The books are the only honest thing in the room. Follow the books. She followed the books for 9 days. 9 days of the daycare's arthritic computer, of the public library's 2-hour session limit, of a printout folded so many times the crease went white. She worked after the last child left and before the first one came, the 2 dark ends of the day when the room was hers. Micah slept at Ruth's twice that week, and Imani told herself it was the tooth coming in and not the thing spreading across her table. She lied to herself in small, survivable amounts. It was how a woman with $41 and no phone had built a life out of a rainstorm, one survivable lie at a time. On the 4th day, the library computer timed out with the registry half-loaded, and she sat in the plastic chair for the full 10 minutes before her next session, hands flat on her thighs, and refused to let the delay mean anything. A machine turning off was not a message. She'd learned to stop reading messages into machines the night one got confiscated off a study desk. She learned to read a corporate registry the way she'd once learned to read a Kang dinner table. Who sat where, who spoke first, who let silence do the cutting. North Meridian had one signature on its formation documents, not a name she knew. A nominee, Delacroix called it. A rented signature. But nominees got paid, and payment left a shadow, and the shadow had an address, and the address showed up one more time in the 400 pages, on a consulting agreement, buried in the disclosure Taejun's own lawyers had handed her by right of the terms she wrote on 3 napkins. The consulting agreement was signed by Han Sung-ho. She sat very still with that for a while. The daycare hummed around her. Somewhere down the block a truck backed up, beeping, the flat electronic warning of a thing that could not see behind itself. Han Sung-ho, a name she'd never heard in 8 years of that family's tables. A man who'd stood on her sidewalk with a fake welfare consultant and a scar beside his eyebrow, saying he represented the interests of the family. He didn't represent the family. He owned the hallway the family's money walked through, and Mi-suk, who moved in front of everyone, who removed the stone before the son could trip. Mi-suk had stood behind him. Imani had noticed it on the sidewalk without knowing what she'd noticed. The old woman a half step back, letting his voice go first. For 8 years, Imani had watched Mi-suk be the front of every room. Now the front of the room was standing behind a rented man. That wasn't retreat. That was a woman hiding her hands. Delacroix called the laundromat's cousin's phone and left word, "Come." He had the 3 payments now, matched to dates, matched to the 3 forged transfers that had sat in a folder on a study desk 2 years and a lifetime ago. He'd never seen those forged transfers. He didn't need to. Imani had recited them from memory. 400,000, the number circled with a ruler, the date of the 9th of March, and Delacroix had gone quiet in a way his grunts never were. Say the date again. March 9th. That's a real date, he said. That's the thing about a good forgery. You don't invent the number. You bend a real one. He slid 2 pages together until their edges kissed. The money that left your family and went into that hallway, it didn't vanish. It came out the other door, and it landed. And where it landed, somebody opened an account to catch it. He looked at her, and for the first time, the old bookkeeper looked something other than bored. "The account's in your name, my love." The truck outside had stopped beeping. The quiet came in. "My name," Imani said. An account you never opened. A tax number that's yours. Deposits sized to look like a woman selling her family's cargo manifests, one careful piece at a time. He took his glasses off. They didn't just throw you out in the rain. They built a second you, a paper you, who did the crime. So that if anyone ever pulled this thread, a regulator, a rival, a court, the thread would run to a woman who was already gone, a woman with no phone, no account, no name on any door. He folded his hands. You weren't collateral. You were the design. Show me, Imani said. He turned the 2 pages toward her and set the golf pencil under a routing line, then under a name that was hers, spelled exactly right, the middle initial and all, the way only family knew to spell it. She looked at the paper the way you look at a photograph of yourself asleep, a face you own, doing something you never chose. The account had opened 4 days after the rain. 4 days. While she'd been in a shelter cot learning the ceiling, someone downtown had walked into a bank with her name and her number and built a criminal out of the woman they'd just put on the street. Every deposit stated, Delacroix said. That's the arrogance. They wanted a trail. A trail points somewhere. This one points at you on purpose. He tapped the last deposit. Whoever did this wasn't hiding a crime. They were storing one, for a rainy day that already came for you and hasn't come yet for them. Imani did not cry. She'd done her crying under a streetlight with a suitcase 2 years gone, and she'd decided then that the family would never again get to watch water leave her body. Instead, she asked the only question that moved the game forward. Why now? Why build all this and sit on it 2 years? Because a shell is a knife in a drawer, Delacroix said. You don't stab with it. You show it, and you show it when showing it wins you something. He tapped the binder's cover, the Kang crest embossed small in the corner. What does your family have coming that's worth a 2-year knife? She knew the answer before he finished the sentence. She'd known it for 2 years without letting herself hold it. A vote. 28 days, Misuk had said in the study. The rain not yet started. The envelope not yet refused. A seat on the council decided in 28 days. Imani had walked out into the storm thinking the vote was Taejun's ambition. She understood now that the vote was a lock, and Micah was the key nobody had known existed until a toddler tilted his head on a sidewalk and pressed a thumb into his palm. 12%. The boy's share, dormant until he came of age, a voting block that would sleep for 16 more years, unless someone controlled the child, and through the child, the block, early. A guardian voting a minor's shares, a grandmother, say, with the right paper, or a partner she financed, standing where the sun used to stand. She saw the sidewalk again, though she didn't want to. Not the grab. She wouldn't spend a second more on the grab. The paper. The paper is coming, Misuk had said in Korean, low, so the police wouldn't follow it. Imani had thought the old woman meant a custody order. She'd been half right and fully blind. The custody wasn't the prize. The custody was the delivery truck. What rode inside it was 12% of a family, and a woman who'd spent 2 years building a bank statement so that on the day the truck arrived, nobody could question who held the keys. A grandmother who removed the stone before the son could trip. Except the son was the one being tripped, and the stone had his own wife's name carved into it. Imani laid it out on the laundromat table with the golf pencil, and Delacroix watched her do it and didn't interrupt, because she wasn't guessing anymore. She was reading. Misuk was not defending the family from Imani. Misuk was taking the family from her son. She'd financed Han, the consulting agreement, the shadow payment to the nominee, all of it her money moving through a man the son had never met. She'd built North Meridian to bleed the son's own funds into a hallway so that when the vote came, Taejun would sit at the table already weakened, already smelling of a fraud in his own house, a fraud wearing his wife's name, and the 12% that should have been the boy's future would swing to a guardian's hand, hers, or Han's, which by then would be the same hand. Taejun thought he was fighting for a seat. He was being unseated by his own mother, one patient payment at a time, and he'd handed the murder weapon to Imani himself, 400 pages of it, because the terms she'd written on 3 napkins made her the one person in the world with the right to read his books. "The son doesn't know," Delacroix said. "Not a question either. The son thinks his mother removes stones so he won't trip." Imani closed the binder. She's been building the stone he trips on. She thought about the phone in her hand, the daycare's cracked spare, not the one Misuk had confiscated 2 years ago and never returned. The family phone, the gift with the strings sewn into it. She thought about calling Taejun and reading him the 3 amounts on the back of her hand. She thought about how his face had changed on the sidewalk when Micah tilted his head, how the man had stopped breathing at the sight of his own eyebrows on a 2-year-old. She didn't call, not yet, because a knife shown too early was a knife handed back. If she brought this to Taejun now, raw, unproven, a bookkeeper's grunts and a woman's memory of a study, he would take it to his mother the way sons take everything to mothers. One more time, one last time, needing it to not be true, and Misuk would remove the stone. The account in Imani's name would close overnight. North Meridian would dissolve into the 900 other mailboxes. The nominee would be paid to forget, and Imani would be left holding 3 amounts on the back of a hand and a story nobody could open. No, Delacroix had set it at the laundromat door, and she'd carried it 9 days. The books are the only honest thing in the room. She needed the books to say it themselves, sealed, stamped, in a hand no Kang could bend. She needed an audit, a real one, an outside firm, a name Misuk couldn't finance, findings on letterhead that a court would have to read the way Imani had once made a policeman read the absence of a court order. She had 400 pages she was allowed to hold. She had a bookkeeper who followed money for the love of the only honest thing in a crooked room. She had a date, the 9th of March, that a forger had been too smart to invent and too careless to bury. And she had a clock she hadn't started but couldn't stop, whatever remained of the days before the vote, ticking down inside a mansion on a hill where the lights still went out one window at a time. She wrote a new line at the top of a fresh page, under North Meridian, under the 3 amounts, under Han Song-ho. Independent audit, outside firm, before the vote. Then she underlined it, once, and did not let the pencil break. Ruth found her still at the table after the children had gone, the binder squared to the edge like something that might slide off the world if she let it drift. Ruth didn't ask. Ruth set a plate down, rice, a fried egg going lacy at the edges, the food she made when words were the wrong tool, and sat across from her the way Delacroix had sat, patient, unbilled. "My mother followed the money to the bottom," Ruth said when the plate was half gone. "You told me that already." Imani turned the fork over. "I didn't tell you what was at the bottom." "Tell me." "Everybody who put it there." Ruth's glasses caught the dead fluorescent light. "Turns out it's crowded down there, Mija. The ones who took it, and the ones who let them, and the ones who looked away because looking cost too much." She reached across and straightened the binder a half-inch it didn't need. "You go down there. You're going to see faces you loved. You ready for that?" Imani thought of a wall of ancestral portraits, 4 generations of Kang men, and a woman who was not on the wall because women were not on the wall, running all of it from behind a rented signature. She thought of the son, who'd stopped breathing on a sidewalk. She thought of the boy asleep across the city with 2 names on his birth certificate, out in the open where she'd hung them so that one day she could show him exactly which half of him came from where. "I've been down there 2 years, Imani said. "I just didn't have a flashlight." Ruth studied her a long moment. The fork paused. And when the light hits the face you loved most, when it's not the old dragon lady, when it's... She stopped herself. She'd raised too many children not to know which sentences you leave unfinished at a table. You keep his son's 2 names on the certificate for a reason. And make sure the reason's still standing when you're done. The reason is asleep across town with a tooth coming in. Imani set the fork down. Everything I do so he never has to read what I read tonight. So the half of him that comes from that hill isn't a thing he has to be ashamed of. It's just a fact. Facts don't hurt a child, secrets do. She said it plainly, the way she said the amounts on the back of her hand. I'm not down there for revenge, Ruth. I'm down there so my son never has to go looking. Now she had 400 pages, and a bookkeeper's golf pencil, and a date a forger couldn't kill. She ate the rest of the egg. She washed the plate. She put the binder in the daycare safe behind the emergency forms, spun the dial, and pressed her palm flat against the cold door, the way she'd once pressed a ring against her sternum in the rain. Somewhere a firm existed that Misuk's money had never touched, and in the morning, Imani would learn its name, and after that the books would begin, at last, to speak in a voice no one in that family could confiscate. She turned off the daycare lights, one switch at a time, the way she did every night now, the way she'd done the night she first went looking. Only tonight she knew what North Meridian was, and North Meridian, she understood at last, had never been a company at all. It was the sound a family maid stealing from itself, run through a hallway, wearing her name on the way out the door. The last light went dark. Imani stood in it a moment, in the quiet after the truck, and let herself feel the shape of the thing she was about to carry into the daylight. Then she locked the door behind her and went to find the firm that Misuk could not buy. The firm took 11 days to say no. 3 of them said no. A 4th stopped answering after the 2nd call. Imani learned the shape of it fast. She would give the intake clerk the words forensic audit and private family holdings, and the voice on the other end would warm, and then she would say the name Kang, and the warmth would leave like water off a tilted plate. One partner was honest about it. We do business in that building, Miss Brooks. Half this city does. He wished her luck the way people wish it when they mean goodbye. She made the calls from the cracked spare phone at the daycare, in the 90 minutes between drop-off and the first nap, standing in the coat closet so Ruth's enrollment computer stayed free. She kept a list on the back of an intake form, 4 names crossed out, 1 circled twice. The circled one was a 2-person shop across the river, a woman named Okafor who had spent 9 years inside a bank's compliance floor before she walked out and hung her own sign. Okafor did not warm and did not cool. She listened to Imani for 6 minutes without a sound, then said, "Bring me the pipe and the water both. I don't work off a story." "When?" "Thursday. Early. I bill by the finding, not the hour." Imani wrote Thursday on the back of her hand, under the 3 figures already fading there, and hung up. For the first time since the laundromat, she let herself believe the books might get to speak in a room a court would have to sit in. That was the morning it broke. Ruth found her first. Came into the closet without knocking, tortoiseshell glasses pushed up into her hair, holding her own phone at arm's length like it had bitten her. "There's a man at the front. Suit. He has an envelope with your name on it, and he says he's a process server." Imani set the spare phone down on the shelf, face up this time. "Mika? Blue room, sleeping. He doesn't know anything's wrong. Keep it that way." The man at the front was young, tired around the eyes, and did the job like a person who did it 40 times a day. He read her legal name off the envelope, watched her nod, and put the papers in her hand. "You've been served. Have a good one." He was already turning before the door shut. She read it standing up. She read it a second time, sitting on the tiny chair by the cubbies, her knees somewhere near her chin, because the words would not hold still the first time. Emergency ex parte motion for temporary custody. In the interest of the minor child, Micah Brooks Kang. Petitioner, Kang Tae-jun. His name, not Mi-suk's, not a company's, his. There was a hearing date stamped 9 days out. There was a paragraph about the child's stability and long-term welfare being best secured within the resources of the paternal family. There was a line, buried in the recitals, about concerns regarding the mother's financial history that may bear on fitness. Financial history, the account she had never opened, the account he did not know she had found. Ruth read it over her shoulder and made a low sound in Spanish that needed no translation. He said no security. He said daylight. He signed your napkins. He signed my napkins, Imani said. She had told Delacroix she would not let the family see water leave her body again. She held to it now. She folded the motion along the crease the server had already put in it, and her hands were steady, and that steadiness cost her more than crying would have. Ex parte. She knew the Latin from 8 years of dinners where lawyers talked shop between courses. It meant one side. It meant he had walked into a courtroom, or his lawyers had, and told a judge a story about her child while she stood in a coat closet, begging strangers to read a spreadsheet. It meant he had decided, alone, that the fastest way to protect Micah was to take him, the exact move his mother had rehearsed on a rainy night with a pen, wearing a different face. She did not call him, not yet. She had learned the price of moving before she understood the board. She spent the nap hour reading every line twice, marking the recitals with a pencil, the way she had marked the forged records in a study 4 years and a lifetime ago. When she reached the bottom, she saw what was missing, and the missing thing told her more than the words did. Nowhere in the motion did it say she was unsafe. Nowhere did it say the boy was hurt, or hungry, or afraid. It said the family had resources. It said her finances raised concerns. It said, in the language of people who pay other people to phrase things, that a Kang belonged with Kangs. Somebody had written this who knew how to point at the fraud account without naming it. Somebody had put the exact shape of Mi-suk's 2-year knife into a father's grief and handed him the pen. She thought about that for a long time. She did not decide he was innocent. She decided it did not matter yet whether he understood what he was holding. He had still swung it. He came at 4, the way he had been coming, a day early because it was Wednesday, and the Saturday visit was 2 days off and he could not wait. He did not know she had been served. She saw that the instant he came through the door, his shoulders were easy, his hands were empty. He was scanning the room for a small boy the way he had learned to. He's not here, Imani said. Ruth took him to her sister's. Something crossed his face. Is he sick again? No. She crossed the room and put the motion on the low table between them, squared to him, so the caption faced up, and he could read his own name under petitioner. He read it standing, the way she had. She watched his face do the thing faces do when the floor moves, the small backward lean, the eyes going twice over the same line. When he looked up, he had the decency to look wrecked. This isn't, he stopped. Imani, this is not what it looks like. Read me the part where you told me. He didn't answer. Read me the part where you called, where you said, Imani, I'm frightened for him, help me understand. The part where you sat in that room with me instead of a lawyer. They said if I moved first. He caught himself using they, and she saw him hate it. There were things I was hearing. About money. About a account with your name. Who told you about an account with my name? His mouth opened, and nothing came, and the nothing was an answer. You filed this 9 days ago, she said. She had done the math on the stamp. You've come here 4 times since. You sat on my floor and let my son put a truck in your lap, and the whole time there was a hearing date in your pocket. You looked at me across that, and you said nothing. I was going to tell you after you had him. She said it flat. No rise. Because the rise was the thing they wanted, and she would not give it to a room, a court, a family, a man. After the paper made it real, you were going to tell me. That's the order it happened in the study too. Paper first, person never. He flinched at study. She had promised herself she would say the next part only if it stayed true when she said it out loud. And it did. I let you in because you signed my terms. You wrote your name under a line that said no decision without my yes first. School, passport, name, haircut. You remember, you had my pen. She picked the motion off the table and held it up, not shaking it, just holding it in the space between them, so the weight of it was visible. This is the biggest decision there is. Where he sleeps, who he wakes up to, and you made it in a room I wasn't allowed in. I'll withdraw it, he said it fast, both hands coming up. Today, I'll call them now. You'll do whatever you do, that's yours. She set the paper down, but the visits stop. The words landed on him like something physical. He took half a step, then stopped himself, because he had spent weeks learning not to cross a room toward a person who hadn't invited him. Imani, he's just started. He lets me. I know what he lets you do. Her voice dropped, and the drop was worse than volume. I watched every minute of it from that door. I know exactly what you're losing, because I'm the one who let you have it. That's what makes this mine to take back. You're punishing him for what I did. It was the cruelest thing he could have said, and she saw that he knew it the second it left him. No, she said. I'm teaching him something you never learned in that family. That love that doesn't respect you isn't love. It's control, wearing love's coat. Your mother put me in the rain and called it protecting you. You filed to take my son and called it protecting him. Same coat. I've had it hung on me my whole marriage, and I am done wearing it, and I am done letting it near him. He stood in the middle of the small room, too big for it, the way he had been too big for the floor the first Saturday. For once he did not reach for anything. When can I see him? When I can read a paper you wrote, and trust that you wrote it with me and not around me. She held the door. Right now, that's not a day I can see from here. He went. He stopped at the threshold like a man who had one more thing, and then he did the only respectful thing left and didn't say it. The door closed behind him soft, because he closed it soft, and she stood with her back against the cubbies until she heard his car pull off, without idling at the corner, without a second car anywhere on the block. He had come alone. He had always, since the napkins, come alone. It did not fix a single thing. It only made it hurt in a cleaner place. Ruth brought Micah back after dark. The boy was asleep on her shoulder, one fist curled in her mustard cardigan, and he stirred when Imani took him and tipped his head, left, thumb into the soft of his palm, even in sleep, chasing a thought too big for 2 years. She held him until the tilt smoothed out. The second envelope came 2 days later, and it did not come from a court. A car she didn't know, a driver who stayed at the wheel, and a man in the back who didn't get out either, only lowered the window a hand's width and held out a slim folder to the boy from the corner store. Imani paid $1 to carry it in. She recognized the coat before the face. Charcoal. Silver at the cuffs. The scar was too far to see, but she didn't need to see it. Han Sung-ho did not come to her door. He sent paper to it, the way he sent everything, through a corridor, with his own hands clean. She opened the folder at the daycare sink with the tap running, the way Delacroix had taught her to read anything that mattered. Somewhere she could look up and see the room. Inside were 2 pages. A number on the first, large, with a lot of zeros. More zeros than a woman with $41 and a cracked phone was supposed to be able to refuse. On the second page, 3 lines of plain language under a heading that used the word voluntary. A full and final relinquishment of all parental rights and claims of the mother in the minor child. A release. A confidentiality clause. A blank for her name spelled, she noticed, exactly right, down to the middle initial, the way only the family knew how to spell it. They had spelled it right on the fraud account too. She stood at the running tap and understood the whole machine in one look, the way you finally see the picture inside the pattern. The motion was the truck. This was the cargo. Taejun files to take the boy and the family's own money makes her look unfit. And while she's drowning in a hearing she can't afford, a clean car pulls up and offers her a rope made of the very money they stole in her name. Sign here, take the number, disappear somewhere warm. She'd heard that offer before, in a study, from a woman with a pen. Warm. They always said warm, like her leaving was a vacation and not an eviction. Sign, and Micah's 12% has no mother standing in front of it. Sign, and a guardian is all that's left between a sleeping boy's voting shares and the hand that wants them early. Sign, and Han never has to prove a thing in a courtroom because there'd be nothing left to fight. She did not tear it up. Delacroix's voice again. A knife shown too early is a knife handed back. She read it a third time, slower, memorizing the phrasing, the heading, the exact fake softness of voluntary. Then she closed the folder and set it flat and dry beside the sink, because it was evidence now, Han's own hand reaching for the same 12% through a different door, the day after a father's motion cleared the way. 2 moves, 2 men, 1 spreadsheet underneath. She had wondered whether Taejun knew what he was holding. She did not have to wonder what Han knew. Han had built the corridor. Han was the corridor. The corner store boy was still waiting for a tip he'd been promised. She gave him 2 of her folded dollars and asked him, "The man in the car, did he say anything?" He said, "Take your time." The boy shrugged, "And that the offer goes down after the hearing." Of course it did. It was priced like everything the family priced, high enough to tempt a drowning woman, structured to fall the moment she got her head above water. They needed her to sign before Thursday, before Okafor opened the pipe and read the water, before a 2-person shop across the river turned a fraud account into a finding on letterhead. Imani looked at the number one more time. It was enough to move a state away and raise her son in a house with a yard and never touch a Kang again. It was enough to make the rain stop, permanently, if all she wanted was for the rain to stop. She thought of the boy asleep with his fist in Ruth's cardigan, tilting his head at a dream. She thought of the certificate with 2 names on it that she had kept open, in daylight, for exactly this, so that one day nobody could tell him where half of him came from except her. She thought, they will pay me to make him a Kang with no mother, or they will take him to make him a Kang with no mother. Every road they've built ends the same place, and I am the only wall on it. She put the folder in the daycare safe, behind the emergency forms, next to the 400 pages. She spun the dial. She laid her palm flat on the cold door of it a second longer than she needed to, the way she'd once closed her hand around a ring in the rain. Then she picked up the cracked spare phone and called the 2-person shop across the river. "Okafor, it's Imani Brooks. Thursday still good?" "Thursday's good. Make it tomorrow," Imani said. "The other side just put a clock on me." There was a pause, the sound of a woman who did not warm and did not cool, deciding something. "Bring the pipe," Okafor said. "Bring the water, and bring whatever they just handed you, because if they're rushing, they're afraid, and afraid people leave their signatures where they shouldn't." Imani looked at the safe. 2 envelopes in it now that had her name spelled perfectly by people who wanted her gone. "They left it," she said. "They always leave it. That's the whole problem with a family that's sure it's already won." She hung up. She turned off the daycare lights. one by one, down the row, the room going dark by sections the way the mansion once had, window by window, at her back. At the last switch, she stopped in the dark and did not let the fear that had been waiting all day come up her throat. She had a hearing in 9 days, a father who'd shown her his mother's face, a clean car dangling stolen money, and a boy asleep across town who was going to grow up knowing exactly where he came from. She had until morning to get to a woman who read water for a living. She locked the door behind her and went. Okafor read water the way other people read weather. She spread the 400 pages across a folding table in a 2-room office that smelled of coffee and toner, put the 2 envelopes to the side, and did not touch them for the first 40 minutes. She started with the pipe. She started with the books. "Talk while I read," she said. "Not the story, the dates." Imani gave her the dates. The account opened 4 days after the rain. The 3 payments a hair under the reporting line. North Meridian formed with a rented signature. The consulting agreement with Han Song-ho's name at the bottom. Okafor made small marks with a mechanical pencil. 1 line per fact. No adjectives on her paper either. When she reached the relinquishment, she stopped. She held it up to the window light and looked at the blank where a name would go. "They spelled you before you signed," she said. "Down to the middle initial. Then they've been spelling you for 2 years." She set it down. "People who are winning don't rush. This one's rushing. That's the crack." She named her price. Not by the hour, by the finding. And she named her condition. She would not present anything she could not stand behind in a room with lawyers in it. That meant a chain. Where did the 400 pages come from? Who signed for them? Imani told her. Courier, signature required. Part of a parenting disclosure Taejun's own lawyers released under the terms she wrote on 3 napkins. Okafor almost smiled. "So the father handed you the knife. He didn't know it was one. They rarely do. The audit took 11 days. Imani lived them 1 drop-off at a time. Micah slept twice more at Ruth's. The cracked spare phone stayed in the coat closet, and every evening at the same hour, Okafor called with 1 more line of the same sentence. The sentence that said a family had been robbing itself and hanging the receipt on a woman it put in the rain. On the 9th day, a man came to the daycare gate who was not a courier and not a lawyer. He was heavy through the shoulders, a little stooped, olive work jacket, reading glasses pushed up into short hair gone gray at the edges. He held an old folder against his chest with both hands, the way a man holds a thing he has carried too long. "Miss Brooks," he said, "you don't know me. My name is Elias Ward." Ruth stepped into the doorway behind Imani. Micah was down for the first nap. "I worked the route," Elias said. "Your route. 4 years, near enough." He looked at the folder, not at her. "I was told which letters not to deliver. Yours." The street noise thinned to nothing. "Come in off the sidewalk," Imani said. He would not sit. He put the folder on the low table and opened it with 2 thick fingers, and inside were photocopies, pale, gray, a machine's memory of paper, postal logs, scan lines, delivery exceptions in a column, the same address again and again, the same instruction code. "Every letter you wrote to that office," he said. "Every one that came back the other way, held, rerouted. I kept the logs because a man told me once, 'Keep the logs, they're the only honest thing in the bag.' He touched the copies. I couldn't stop doing it. They had a way of making sure, but I could keep the logs." Imani looked at the columns and did not reach for them yet. "Who told you which letters?" The instruction came down through a scheduler. Money came separate. He swallowed. "I was weak, Miss Brooks. I want that said plain. I took it, then I couldn't spend it, and I couldn't give it back, so I kept the proof instead, like proof was the same as being decent." He shook his head once. "It isn't. I know that." "Why now?" she said. not sharp. The word she had asked Delacroix, the word she kept asking the dark. Because I saw the old woman's car outside a daycare on the news feed the community board runs. A car outside a place with babies in it. His jaw worked. I moved paper. I didn't sign up to move a child. Imani looked at the pale columns and thought of the letters she had written in the first winter, the ones that came back to her marked, and the ones that never came back at all. She had believed, for a while, that Taejun read them and chose silence. She set that belief down now, gently, the way you set down a thing you have held too tight. How much, she said. Enough to matter, not enough to sleep. Elias took off the reading glasses and folded them. I told myself it was just paper, routes full of paper. Then one day it wasn't paper, it was a woman's whole life in an envelope, and I still put it in the wrong tray. He looked at her at last. I've got a daughter your age. I couldn't look at her straight for 4 years. Imani let the silence hold him a moment. Then, quiet, in the register that made a room lean in, there's a firm reading books across the river. You'll say all of that to them, on paper, with your name, everything you just told me, and the part you're still holding back. There's no part I'm holding back, not anymore. He nodded like a man setting a weight down at last. That's what the logs are for. The logs told half. Okafor found the other half in a single delivery that had gotten through. One letter, 2 years back. It had not reached Taejun's hand. It had reached his office, and it had died on a desk. The desk belonged to his chief of staff, Park Jun-ho, 31, a young man with a father's old watch and a sister whose name turned up, when Okafor pulled the thread, on the intake ledger of a treatment center 3 states away, paid in full, in cash, through an account that touched North Meridian on its way. Mi-suk had not blackmailed Park Jun-ho with a threat. She had done it the family way. She had healed something he could not afford to heal, and then she owned him. So he sat on the one letter that got through, Imani said, on the phone, in the coat closet, the cracked screen warm against her ear. He sat on it, Okafor said. Taejun was 1 desk away from the truth for 2 years. It was in his own building. His own man kept it from him, because a woman paid for a sister's medicine. Imani closed her eyes. Somewhere in that building a man had walked past his own son's existence 100 times, and the wall between them had a name, and the name had a sick sister. He'll testify, Okafor said. Park. I've met men who've been carrying a thing like this. He wants it out of him more than he wants to be safe. I'd bet the finding on it. Bet it, Imani said. She went to Taejun herself. Not by phone. She would not put this on a cracked screen. He came to the coffee shop 3 blocks from the daycare, 9 in the morning, 1 hour, the same terms as the first time, because the terms were still hers. He came alone. No second car. The overcoat, the watch, the ring. She did not look at any of it now, only at his hands on the table, still, waiting. She put 3 things in front of him in order: the postal logs, the letter that reached his office and died on Park Jun-ho's desk, and the first page of Okafor's finding, on letterhead, the sentence that said, the money left his family, ran through an empty company, and landed in a stranger's name, a stranger she had made, a paper woman spelled exactly right. He read the logs first. His mouth moved once, silently, on a date. 2 years, he said. 2 years. It was in my building. He set the page down with a care that cost him. Jun-ho. His sister was dying. Your mother paid for the medicine. Imani kept her voice level. That's how she does it. She doesn't put a knife to you. She fixes something, and then she keeps the receipt. He was very still. Then he said the thing she had waited a long time to hear from a Kang, and had stopped expecting. I filed against you, he said. with the same hand she used on you. I see it now. He looked up. I withdraw it. Today, before I leave this table, I make the call. Withdraw it clean, she said. No refiling under another name. No court, she's arranged in a back room. Clean? He turned the letterhead page toward himself again. And this, the audit, it can't be a firm that does business in my mother's building. It isn't. It's 2 people over the river who charge by the finding and can't be bought by a name. Then move it further, he said. Whatever you need. An outside firm on record. One the vote has to look at. If my family robbed itself, I want it read in the open, not settled in a hallway. He pressed his palm flat on the table, the old gesture his son made in his sleep. I gave you the 400 pages without knowing. Use them. Use all of it. He made the call from the table. She watched him do it. When it was done, he asked, and this time, he asked it right. Not for custody, not for the shares, only, when he's ready, only when you say, I'll wait as long as that is. When you can sit in a room and want nothing out of it but him, she said, you'll see him. The vote was set for a Tuesday, 28 days from a night in a study that Imani had counted down in her body without a calendar. She did not go to the tower. She sent paper, and she sent the people the paper could not speak for. Okafor went, with a bound report and a spine that did not bend for a name. Elias Ward went, folder against his chest, and laid 4 years of held letters on a council table under a light that finally reached them. Park Jun-ho went, gray and thin, his father's watch on his wrist, and testified to the one letter he had buried and the reason he had buried it. And when he was done, he took the reason out of his pocket, the treatment ledger, and set it beside the letter so the room could see the shape of the leash. The audit did the rest. It walked the money out of the Kang funds, through the rented signature and the empty company, past the 3 payments a hair under the line, into an account opened 4 days after a woman was put in the rain. It showed the name spelled exactly right. It showed the relinquishment offered a day after a father's motion, from a clean car, by a man who never came to the door, Han Sung-ho, whose consulting agreement sat under the whole machine like a foundation stone. Han lost the contracts that lived on the family's name the moment the name pulled away from him. The accounts froze. A company that was only a corridor has nothing to stand on when the water stops running through it. And Mi-suk. She sat in ivory at the end of the table, the jade ring, the family brooch, the architecture of a woman who had never once been asked to explain herself. She had financed a man to unseat her own son. She had built an empty company to bleed his funds, so that on this Tuesday he would arrive weak and smelling of a fraud wearing his wife's name, and the boy's 12% would slide through a guardian's hand into hers, or into Han's, which by then was the same hand. For a long moment, no one at the table spoke. These were men who had eaten at her husband's table, who had bowed to her at weddings and funerals for 30 years, who had learned the family's power partly by watching her hold it. They had thought the danger was the black wife, with no account and no name in any door. The danger had been sitting in ivory at the head of the table the whole time, spelling that wife's name for her, one forged letter at a time. The council removed her, not with shouting, with a vote of their own, quiet, final, the way that world ends things. Someone asked her, at the end, in Korean, low, whether it was true, that she had done this to her own child. The transcript would say she answered only, I did it before he could stumble. The same sentence she had said in a study, 2 years and a lifetime ago, the stone she removed. She had removed the son to save the family, and there was no one left in the room who could tell her the difference anymore. The court read what the council read. It named Imani Brooks primary caregiver of Micah Brooks Kang. It vacated the emergency motion, already withdrawn. It noted for the record that the fraud account bearing her name had been opened without her, spelled by the hand that framed her, and it lifted the shadow the way you lift a thing off a child's chest so the child can breathe. The paper woman died on that Tuesday. The real one kept her son. Taejun did not fight for the shares. This surprised the men who write about such families. On the record, in front of the council that had just cut down his mother, he renounced unilateral control of Micah's 12%. He put the boys' block under an independent administrator who could move nothing without joint approval. His and Imani's, both hands or neither. The premium a boy carried would sit untouched and clean until the boy himself was old enough to hold it, and no guardian, no grandmother, no partner financed in the dark would vote it early through him. "He's not a lock," Taejun said, "and my son is not the key." He said it in English, for her, and then a word in Korean, under his breath, that was not for the room. Then he did the last thing, and he did it without a condition attached, which was the only way it would have been let in the door. He bought the daycare, not to hold it. He put it into a community trust. The building, the blue room, the small chairs, the cracked spare phone in the coat closet, with the deed in the neighborhood's name and Imani's hand required on anything that touched it. There was no clause about reconciliation, no line that said she owed him a family in exchange. He had learned, at last, the difference between fixing a thing to own someone and fixing a thing to set them free. His mother never learned it. He learned it at a low table over 3 napkins, one term at a time. The loops the family left open, they left open the way arrogant people always do. Certain they had already won, they never bothered to close the doors behind them. The phone came back. In a sealed evidence return, months later, the family device Mi-suk had turned face down on a study desk and locked in a drawer, everything on it intact, because a woman sure of victory never bothers to wipe a thing she believes no one will ever read. It held the scans, the contacts, a photograph of an ultrasound with a date, March 9th, and the heavy suitcase, the one she left at the iron gate in the rain with the winter coat and the ultrasound prints, because she could carry only the lighter one, turned up in a lost property record, tagged the night she walked down that hill. It had been logged, boxed, forgotten in a warehouse of unclaimed things. Inside, in a plastic sleeve gone brittle, the ultrasound prints, the proof she had carried in her body all along and thought she had lost at a gate. She had never needed them in the end, but she got them back. A woman gets to keep the picture of the day she first heard him. The fake consultant with the laminated badge, Kim, turned out to be exactly what the badge was: rented, a day player from a costume shop, a woman paid to look like authority for an afternoon on a sidewalk. Her statement closed the last small door. Even the authority had been forged. And the thing Mi-suk had hinted at, in the study, in the rain, that she had done this before, to someone, once. Okafor found her, following the money backward past North Meridian into an older season of the family's books. A first daughter-in-law, from before Imani, before 8 years, paid quietly to disappear and never named again at a Kang table. The pattern was not new. Imani had simply been the one who read the water instead of drowning in it. Delacroix got his promise kept. Imani came out of it on her feet. She went back to the laundromat one afternoon, past the machines, and told him, and he only nodded over a golf pencil and said the books had been honest, same as always, and she had been the one brave enough to read them. He would not take money this time either. He took the coffee. Months moved the way months do, not in a jump, one drop-off, one nap, one Tuesday at a time. Imani became the coordinator of the daycare she had once swept before dawn. The building was the neighborhood's now, and her hand was on it, and Ruth ran the blue room and told the new mothers the story of the woman who followed the money to the bottom and was the only one standing when the water went down. Taejun came on Saturdays. He sat on the floor that was still too small for him. He wanted nothing out of the hour but the boy. He waited the way she told him to wait. And one Saturday, unasked, with no camera and no name to serve, Micah walked across the room, tilted his head to the left, pressed his thumb into his palm, and said a word he had chosen himself. Appa. Taejun's shoulders came down all at once, the way a man's do when he sets down a weight he did not know he was still carrying. He did not reach. He waited until the boy climbed into his lap on his own. Imani watched from the doorway and let her hand rise to the thin chain at her throat. The ring was still there. She had carried it through the rain, under the gate light, through 2 years of a daycare and 400 pages and 2 envelopes in a safe. She wore it now where she had always worn it, on the chain, against her breastbone, hers to keep and hers to name. She did not go back to the mansion. Not that Saturday, not any Saturday. The house had emptied its windows one by one the night it put her out, and she had built a lit room of her own, 3 blocks from a coffee shop, with small chairs and a boy who said his father's name because no one had made him. She closed the ring inside her hand once, warm now. Then she let it fall back against the chain, and she stayed in the doorway, in the light, and she watched her son choose his father in a room that no one could take from either of them again. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Tell me, my loves, have you ever been thrown out with your bags at a gate, holding a truth no one in the room would let you speak? Have you ever kept a single name in your memory, a small forged detail, and waited years for the day it would finally set you free? And when someone offered you money to sign away what mattered most, did you have the strength to stand instead of sign? Mark my words, dignity kept quietly is still power. Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, truth, and motherhood, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.